Maybe it's gonna work now. Hello!
Hello. Can you
Yay!
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, wonderful. I
Yes, yes.
was telling you earlier I was having a really difficult time trying to figure out what type of audio setting
Yeah,
I wanted to use, so we're just going to go with the AirPods mic and see how it goes.
sounds good. Yeah, I've got the old school and it normally does pretty well. So, okay, awesome. We got some folks joining. So, welcome to Creativity, where I sip tea and talk creative stuff with creative folks. Um, I was babbling in the beginning because I always post these for other people. I was like, well, I have my Inquisition mug that Jonathan actually got me, and it was
Oh
blank before I put
yeah.
my hot tea in, and then all the Inquisition folks showed up, so that was fun.
hmm
So welcome to my podcasty thing with Instagram Live. Normally I go and like research people, but I don't really need to research you because you're one of my besties
Oh
and
right, yeah.
my
Would be a very short
co-author.
research project.
So I'll give a quick introduction for anybody watching who watches later, and then we'll see where our chat takes us
Sounds
and
good.
if chaos ensues. So Jonathan Fuller is an author of science fiction and fantasy, including the book Trials of the Innermost, which he co-authored with one of his best friends. Hey, that's me. Um, Including a short story, Cozy Winter prequel story, The Lady's Crown Bearer. And of course, Jonathan has his own projects that he is working on as well. So I hope to talk about those as we get into it. He is a ardent fan of science fiction and fantasy. He can talk about animes, cars, RPGs. Part of the reason why we connected was because of RPGs and various sci-fi geeky stuff. I think maybe Star Wars was one of the first ones we talked about. So anyway, that's the brief word bomb for me of a bio for Jonathan. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I actually think the first thing in the way of like geeky, nerdy interests that I asked you about were the Battlestar Galactica
Yes.
figures on your desk because I recognized the Star Wars ones, of course, but I was unfamiliar with BSG at the time, BSG Battlestar Galactica. Um, and I was like, what is that? Because it looks cool. And, that was the figure that launched an entire science fiction and fantasy series.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I hooked you on Battlestar Galactica, and we've talked about it for so long that I always forget that it was me and not you that introduced it. I was the first one to introduce. So
You were. Yeah, I knew of it from pop culture. I think that at that time the Bears beats Battlestar
I
Galactica
think so.
had entered pop culture, so I knew of it from that context, but I'd never actually watched the series or dived into it. And so I'm so glad you introduced me to it because it remains one of my all-time favorite shows.
Yes, yes. I was talking to another guest the other day. So anybody's watching, I post all these on Instagram, and one of my previous guests, we were talking a little bit about Battlestar Galactica and some of the influences there. So always nice to find fellow, so say we all folks that we can shout that with.
Yes.
Let's see. What do I want to get into? Well, why don't we start a little bit because we might have some people who have followed both of us with our J&K account popping in. What do we want to tease out about the sequel to Trials of the Innermost, or what we're working on there? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, that's a good thing to discuss. So, for anyone who's listening who may not already be subscribed to our newsletter, um, you might want to be because we are pushing out a very fun update in the next couple of weeks regarding a new point of view that's going to be added to the sequel to Trials of the Innermost. Those of you who have read Trials of the Innermost know it's a multi POV or multi point of view story told from the perspectives of the six truth seekers. And you know that we lost one of those points of view by the end of the book. I won't say whose in case anyone hasn't read, so no spoilers. But don't worry, it will be replaced, and we're very excited about who that individual is and can't wait to share it with you. But that'll be premiering on our premiering. Is that the right word? I don't know.
Yeah,
Debuting. How about that? That'll be debuting on our blog, tentatively scheduled for August 5th. So if you're subscribed to our newsletter, you'll get an email notification when that post drops so you can find out who the mysterious new character is.
And I think the character would like the idea of it being a premiere, so that works really well.
Yes, that's true. They would absolutely be on board with that.
Yes. I'm very, very excited about this, of course, because it's also my project. I was thinking the other day about how we wrote the first book together and kind of the start was like, I wouldn't call slow, but like we didn't have the idea to go actually publish for a while. We were just doing it for fun. So we did kind of things, our own way and did all the world building and stuff. And now book two, we're kind of done with the world building. I mean, we still fly by the seat of our pants sometimes and get to create some new stuff that fits in there. But what would you think is the most different thing with how we are writing book two versus how we wrote book one?
Well, we're more organized for one thing.
This is true.
uh, some of that was foisted upon us, and I say that in the best way. Like we needed more structure, and so I'm grateful that some of that was imposed upon us, and then we kind of created the rest ourselves, just from lessons learned from Toady. So definitely, we're more organized and structured in our approach this time around. But I think we're also just better writers, and that should not be underestimated as a key difference going into this second book. Because I know you have spent so much time honing your craft, like reading books and guides and reading material from our genre to keep yourself abreast of current conventions. I haven't been quite as diligent in that as you have, but I have benefited from your learning.
I was going to say by
So
like osmosis, so I share with you. So
yes, exactly. So I think that anyone who read book one and enjoyed it is going to be pleasantly surprised by the development of our craft between now and then too.
100% agreed. We were reading through some of the stuff that we had written. We'd actually written it really close to the time we wrote the original Trials of the Innermost stuff. And of course, Trials of the Innermost went through a couple edits, but we hadn't really touched book two as much. And I went and looked at some of that, and you did too. And we just marked it all up like, okay, this has got to go. We got to move these things around. So you can totally tell both of us have leveled up our game. To bring in some video game references, we always like to level up. We've gone on some side quests, and we've gotten better. Speaking of side quests, I want to talk about some of your projects that you're working on, your solo ventures. Um, do you want to talk about Mesmeralda?
Sure. That's a good one to start with. I don't even think I've teased anything about that on social media whatsoever, just because I was really moving along with a full head of steam, and then that all just stopped when we started working on book two of Etheria Cycle in earnest. But it's just about halfway done, so I suppose it's worth talking about. Um, the so I This is definitely a story that I've tried to have more fun writing than be too concerned with uh, it being like perfect right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very much a perfectionist. I think that's something that we have in common, and it's easy to get caught up in that sort of like fixing everything as you go along method of writing, and that really slows things down. And so I've tried to just take a little more joy in the process of the creation itself and just get it on the page, and we can go back and fix it
Right.
later. Um, with that said, Mesmeralda, I think, falls into the trope of the magical girl type of stories where you have a main character who awakened into magical talents at a young age and disagreed with her parents' views on it, and so decided to run away, built a life for herself as an entertainer. An illusionist is her trade, actually. And she's built up a modest amount of fame through doing so, and is now returning to her hometown as a grown woman and with a completely different point of view from her adventures and travels as an entertainer. And so the story really begins with this clash of her new ideology and uh, worldview with where she came from, which is, of course, I'm sure you can guess where that was inspired from, but plot twist, or not plot twist, spoiler, it's my childhood. Um, but it also, that return trip home gets upended by an invitation to attend a ball at the Court of Many Shadows, which is known
Love
as
that name.
something of a mysterious, kind of shady organization that is sort of a harbor for criminals and less savory characters. And so Mesmeralda is a little bit thrown by this invite, but also curious enough to go ahead and attend. And so from there, things, of course, escalate. So um, I won't say anything more than that because I think that's a pretty good, nice little teaser of
Yeah.
what's coming in the story. But it's been a lot of fun to write. I've really tried to infuse this story with a unique take on magic that has some of my own ideas, but then also ideas that were inspired by other authors I've read, and so that's been a really um, fun journey so far.
Awesome. I love that you said focusing on the fun because I think a lot of times, at least some of the writers that I see out there on social media talking about things like we get really into, is this right? Is this going to be the right story and sell? And like we get really worried about all these things, and sometimes we can lose that joy. And so it's really great
Mm-hmm.
to have that project where you can really focus on, this brings me joy, and I want to share that joy with others. Plus, you've got this really cool title. I love the name Mesmeralda for the illusionist character. So I'm so excited for you to keep writing the story and get it out there at some point.
Yes, me too. It's a very personal story because in the world of Mesmeralda, magic is a thing to be feared and controlled and othered in a certain sense, and so that is very much a metaphor for some of my own life experiences. And I'm excited for people who maybe have felt like I have before, where you didn't quite fit in the place you grew up, and it was for a reason that was completely out of your control. It, I think, will be very relatable for folks in the same position.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of hinted at it, and I wanted to make sure to talk about it too. That way, any other authors can kind of get some ideas. We both, you and I, have non-author day jobs, and we have other things that we do. You've got your flag football. I've got my kiddos. So, what works for you might not work for everybody, but what works for you to fit in writing time when you've got other life stuff?
Yeah, that's always a bit of a struggle. And it's not necessarily finding the time, it's finding, I think, the mental energy to associate with that time. Because I could block my calendar, but I could arrive at that 1 hour time block and be like, the last thing I want to do is write. And so I think that's why it's especially important to make sure that you're not losing your creative energy and desire to be writing and sacrificing it on the altar of, I have to get this page done. With that said, I have found that for me personally, setting a daily word count goal has worked pretty well for an attainable goal that's measurable. It will definitely help me progress the story fairly quickly, honestly. Like if I wrote every day for a year, I'd have a massive book. So assuming I'm going to miss some days because of, vacation, life, what have you, let's say I only wrote 150 days out of the year. That's still 150,000 words. I mean, which is a pretty good chunk of a book. So 1,000 words per day has been my writing goal for some time now, and it's propelled me pretty far with Mesmeralda, and I've been pleased with that. Now that we pivoted to working on book two of the Etheria cycle more heavily, I find that actually having the co-author system really helps a lot because it allows us to kind of transfer the workload back and forth based on who has availability, who is consumed in life and other things at the moment. And so we're really able to dynamically manage projects in a way that I think if I were writing by myself would be a lot more challenging to do. Um, so I know I definitely appreciate having a co-author for that reason, and that's a unique feature of our partnership. I know that not every writer will have, but in a similar vein, I think it's great to have writing friends. We have both at some point or another joined literary organizations for our states and or communities, and meeting other writers, networking with them, talking to them can really help stoke the fires of creativity when they've burnt out. They may have other ideas and strategies to help you continue creating. And so having a network of some kind, whether it's a co-author in our case or friends who are writers, I think is a key thing that helps me succeed and can help others too.
Definitely. I've talked to a lot of people now through these Instagram lives, and a frequent thing is about like connecting with others and having kind of either like a just a pick me up squad, somebody who can remind you that no, your writing isn't terrible, because we go through that. We go through stages where we feel that way, or having like a writing group where you can ask things, and then just networking. Like with our release, our debut was last year, so we were part of the group for 2023 and met some people in there, and we continue to interact with them as well. So that support system, even though writing can feel very solo, you're in your brain or you're in the paper, you're in your computer, like it doesn't have to be. You can still kind of make it a team sport a bit, and help with the load. But yeah, we've got this unique um, collaboration, which anybody, I would encourage you to try out collaboration. It's not for everybody, but we've enjoyed it. It probably helps that we were really good friends to start with. Um, Besides like the sharing of the load and such, what else do you think is a benefit from like a collaboration project?
I really have always enjoyed the fact that you just approach things and think about things differently than I do. I mean, we're different humans, of course, we're going to do that. But when it is in a creative process, I love that we can look at the same problem and come up with completely different interpretations or solutions. And then, Captain Planet style, by our powers combined, kind of create this holistic solution that embodies the best of both of our ideas. And I think that creative synergy is really cool because what emerges from it is something unique. It's not just mine, it's not just yours, it's ours, and otherwise may have never existed. So I really love that aspect of it. Um, I think the other thing is like on the subject of becoming better writers, like we have pushed each other to do so. We've talked about this many times, but I'm more of a succinct, dialogue heavy type of writer, and you're much better at description and making sure that the senses are engaged. And so I know I've learned from you to remember those details and things to help, the reader view what's being described. And so just the ability to, as you put it earlier, learn from osmosis from one another kind of keeps that process of honing your craft always ongoing.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I tell people all the time that that last one where I feel like when we went into it, I felt terrible at dialogue, and now I feel much stronger
Yeah.
about it. But it was because we shared what our strengths are, and we learn from each other, or we just recognize that okay, well this is not my strong suit, but Jonathan's much better. I'm going to hand off this part, and it's really cool to see what comes from our ideas when we mush our stuff together. Besides Mesmerelda, I know you're working on some other projects, or at least one other book, because I read quite a bit of the beginning of it. Do you want to talk about any of your other projects?
Yeah, and I think this might be beneficial for people to hear, if only from the perspective of sometimes you start something and you're excited about it, and then um, realize that maybe it's not the best use of your energy in the moment, just because there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make it better. I started an epic fantasy project of my own that I was very passionate about, and then I submitted a part of the manuscript to a contest and got some great feedback from it, which was super helpful, but it also made me realize that I needed to do some pretty substantial reworking of the introductory portion of the story to make it work better. And it's epic fantasy, so there's a lot of world building happening, there's a lot of moving parts, and it just didn't make sense at the time to go back and do all those changes because we were neck deep, I think, in writing The Lady's Crown Bearer and working on some new advertising and promotion stuff. So I just didn't have the energy to direct into doing a pretty substantial rework of the entire beginning of a novel, along with everything else. But it's still out there. It still is a thing that I am dedicated to finishing. But I think I've realized it's more of a long term project than I initially thought because it's a huge world. There's a lot of different elements to it, and I want to make sure I get the story right because it's a very important one to me. So someday it will emerge from the dark corners of Dropbox.
Right. And I know you're a lot like me where you've got these side projects. So if you're stuck or you're waiting for me to finish something for the sequel in the Etheria cycle, you can pivot. I know other people have to focus on one project. I
Mm-hmm.
find no problem in swiveling, but I've never asked you pointedly, like, how do you keep track and make sure, like, when you swivel, that you can get back into that other world when you've been working on something else?
I sometimes have to go and refresh my memory. Like I have to read the preceding chapters or go consult my world building notes. It's not always easy to jump back in for me. But it depends on the time, of course, like anything else. If it
Yeah.
was a week ago, I'll be fine. If it was like a month ago, then I might need to spend some time brushing up.
Yeah. I'm always amazed, like, when we would go to conventions and you've got the author up there talking about their book. And I'm like, man, if I ever got put up in front of there, I would forget what's in half of these chapters. So, like, I'm always having to reread what I wrote, regardless if it's the project I worked on yesterday or not. It's like my brain's just like, that was yesterday.
Right. Yeah, thank goodness for the find function in Word, because otherwise I would forget half of what we wrote.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we got a few more minutes. Let's end on maybe a fun random question. My cup made me think of it with Inquisition. What game, movie, or book in the sci-fi or fantasy realm have you recently consumed that you would recommend?
Oh, um, that's a great question, and I'm trying now to think of what I've just been reading. So, in the sci-fi realm, and I think I've mentioned this to you perhaps in the past, but I am a big fan of Warhammer 40K.
Yep.
There was, if anyone watching is not familiar, there's a thing called Humble Bundle, which is a website that basically generates curated bundles of themed content that you can get for a discount price. Christina was the one who showed it to me, and they send a lot of emails, but it's worth it because about every 1 in 20 emails will be something that I'm like, I must have this. And
Yes.
one of them was a bundle of stories from the Black Library, which is kind of, for anyone who doesn't know, the Warhammer 40K universe is a grim, dark one, so it is kind of relentlessly dark and depressing, but I love the world building and the setting that was created for it. So I kind of like drink some mood boosting tea and then dive right in. But it was a bundle of stories from that universe that I just finished. Significant among them was what's called the Dark Angels trilogy, which is about a specific chapter of Space Marines that have this hidden secret past that they don't want, even members of their own chapter don't even know the truth about, except for an inner circle. And when it starts to become a little bit more known, it forces these Marines to question are we really fighting for the right reasons? And um, I think I just like it because it has some of the absurdity of sword and sorcery, where it's like there's absolutely no way this would ever happen, combined with the sci-fi, you know, spaceships, aliens, etc. Um, but it's been fun. I
Good.
You can the nice thing about Warhammer 40K is you can kind of dive into it wherever you want and it
Okay.
will be fine. It's not always a linear story.
That's nice. That's always good. I get
So,
overwhelmed sometimes when like, okay, I'm gonna dive into this series or whatever, and it's like, oh, so many books.
yeah, exactly.
Nice. I kind of like Battlestar Galactica. I have to be in the right mood to read or consume certain things. So something dark. I right now I'm more in like the light and fluffy mood. Very
Hmm.
much like a mood reader. So one day I will get to that and what you always recommend to me, which is Dune. I know I got to get to it, but
Dune's a tough one. That is a beast of a series. So I don't know if I'd be in a rush to start it now because it's an investment of time.
yeah. But I do need to read. We were reading the Wheel of Time
Mm,
series, and I got through the first book, so I need to get through book two so I can talk to you about that one next. But there, sometimes it's just I need quicker stuff.
yeah, I know. I understand.
Well, anyways, thanks for joining me. If people want to find you, we have our co-author website that hosts a lot of Jonathan's stuff. So anytime he has any blog appearances, anytime he's going to release new books, including our co-authored stuff, that is jonathanandchristina.com. And as a reminder, he's got the short story that we wrote together, The Lady's Crown Bear, which is a cozy winter fantasy short story, which is a prequel and to Trials of the Innermost, which is our book one for the Etheria cycle. And then Jonathan, you can follow him you're on Twitter, Instagram. Those are your two main ones, right?
Yeah, I have tried dabbling in Snapchat, but in true millennial fashion, I just end up messaging through it instead of snapping. So,
Yeah, I only do Snapchat with my sisters. I haven't figured out how to use it any other way. So,
yeah.
so Twitter, here at Instagram, Diary of Jay.
Mhm.
What else do you talk about on there besides writing? What can they follow you for?
My Instagram, you'll see a lot of my travels. I went to Greece this year, so there's a ton of pictures from that on there. A lot of flag football related content, and then silly, nerdy memes.
Yeah. Oh, and your Legos, like
Oh
you
yes,
have
yeah.
Rivendell. You've got
Mhm.
that. Have you taken a picture yet of the light setup? Oop, I lost you. I lost your sound. I lost your sound. Try again.
Yes, someone tried to call me. Sorry about
No,
that.
that's okay.
Um, yeah, I have Rivendell and a couple of others, but then Sauron's Tower of Barad-dûr is in my closet waiting to be built.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I'm excited. Got to show me because I don't have time to build them, and then the children. So I live the Lego dream through you. So, well, thank you, my co-author and one of my besties, for joining me today for the chaos.
yes, thank you for having me. It was a lot of
Yay!
fun, as always.
Well, I will talk to you as always later.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.